Program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. I'm Sarah Higdon. This is Transformative Freedom. Sorry, trying to get it to go live. So there was a cyber attack on X this morning, and so it's been having issues all day. And it appears that I cannot go live over on X right now. So we're just here on YouTube. So most of y'all, I think, watch over here anyway, so that's good. I'm glad you're here. But it's been an interesting week, right? So I got some big stuff coming up. I can't wait to let y'all know. I can't tell you that right now, but I will let you know when I can. But it's big news, big stuff coming for me, and so make sure you stay tuned to my channel, and so you know what's always going on. Yeah, the eye emoji is a great one. You'll be watching. You just got to watch. But there's some stuff coming up that I'm really excited about, so can't wait to show you all that. Kind of going into what we talked about last week, kind of just jump right into it. So the Trump administration has now said that they are strongly considering large-scale sanctions on Russia until a final ceasefire and settlement. Now, this is exactly the playbook that Trump said that he was going to use when it came to these to the war in Ukraine. So initially he basically said the way that he would get this done, this whole deal done, would be to tell Ukraine that if they don't agree to the deal, that he would cut off all funding, and that would be it. And then he would tell Putin, if he didn't agree to the deal, then we would be backing Ukraine fully, in basically to take them out and cause more issues, right? And so since there's no deal on the table, it would appear as though, it would appear as though this is kind of the moving forward in that process. So cut all funding for Ukraine, as well as sanctions on Russia. It's kind of a neutral deal to get everybody to the table to negotiate peace. This is what President Trump said on Truth Social, said based on the fact that Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I'm strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions, and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final statement agreement on peace is reached to Russia and Ukraine. To get to the table right now before it's too late. Thank you. So this is just to get everybody to the table. That's kind of what we knew was going to happen, what Trump was going to do in the first place. to get a ceasefire and then get a peace deal worked out between them. So it's kind of the neutral stance. So I think it's moving forward, and this is kind of the update from last week. One other, so this is a story that was in the news, and people just want to hate Elon Musk so much that they're just failing at basic logic right now. So the Elon Musk sent so SpaceX sent up Starship up, was it the other night, and the ship itself blew up, right? So let's just play this and I'll discuss it in a second.
Thursday, a SpaceX Starship rocket exploded just minutes into its test flight. The FAA temporarily stopped air traffic around Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, and Orlando. It is the second consecutive Starship test flight from Elon Musk's company to end with destruction. All I could think about was, I can't sing.
No, please don't. That's good. That's good. We got it. We understand how painful that was for y'all out there. Just as watching things blow up.
This is where you tell us that you starred as Glinda in your
you better
production of Wicked.
No. But I've done a number of shows.
The
but
Wizard?
anyway.
Why did they let him put this rocket up in the air after they were still investigating the last explosion?
Well, so this is the thing. And that's probably why it exploded. But the thing to keep in mind is my suggestion for Elon, his response to all of this was rockets are hard. And Mr. Musk, if they're so hard, why don't you go back to your day job and work that out? And leave those of us who do government to do government, because you can't do both. And clearly you're failing right now at both. Your rockets are blowing up and the government's blowing up. So I suggest you concentrate on the one thing you think you know more about and do that. And leave the rest to those of us who know a little bit of how to provide services to people who need them and make the government function. Not to say that it can't be changed. Yeah, there are changes that need to be made in government, just like there may be some changes you need to do with your rocket program so the ish don't blow up every time it goes up in the sky, because that's billions of dollars wasted too. I think there should be a federal investigation. I think DOJ should take a close look at how those dollars are being spent right now, because clearly we're not getting our money's worth. So just a thought.
There's a ground stop.
Because rockets are hard.
To Michael's
so
point,
is government.
Alicia, there was a ground stop. Like, yes, perhaps Mr. Musk needs to take a tougher tact and look at what his quote unquote real job is, because this rocket blowing up affected airports in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. There was a ground stop.
3 or 4 jurisdictions, ground stop. And that costs money. All right. So.
Did you guys see the tweet from Representative Jasmine Crockett about this?
So they are just gloating. Yeah, exactly. They will weaponize anything to attack Elon. Listen, SpaceX has not had a single flight that has a person has, knock on wood, a person has died in. So that's amazing. Here's the thing. Do they not understand how innovation works? Do they not understand that innovation is gained through failure? They don't. They just want to attack Elon Musk and think that he's actually failing at this. People can do multiple things at the same time. People that know computers are pretty good at government. Elon Musk can do multiple things at the same time. The fact that these rockets are blowing up means that they're finding out new things about space travel every single time. Okay, so failure tells you what works and what doesn't work. I mean, do you think Thomas Edison, when he was inventing the light bulb, just went, oh yeah, got it on the first try? Do you think that like innovation in anything happens on the first try? Very, 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 very rarely. Like how many Tesla batteries do you think that he destroyed because they didn't work before they actually did work? This is they're trying to mock science and how science actually works. Like this is how science works. If something goes wrong, you figure out what went wrong and you isolate that, you change it, and then you try to do it again next time. It's not guaranteed. Like you can only isolate one issue at a time, right? So think about like a double-blind study, right? Where you isolate everything but one variable and you change that one variable. Well, if that one variable, if it works with that one variable change, then you're good. If it doesn't work, then you have to move on and see what else and isolate variables. But again, these are rockets that are meant to do things that we've never done before. These are not just, sending stuff into space. They're not manned rockets. Manned flights are a lot different and a lot safer. These are test rockets to see what works. I mean, think about this. Elon Musk miraculously caught 2 rockets out of the air. Imagine if one of those had failed. Yeah, taxpayer-funded NASA rockets fail equals nothing, except for death. Private citizen source rocket, you suck. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much. I think SpaceX, they mostly get funded by. They do have heavy government contracts, I do believe. However, this is all part of how you innovate science. These people, they want to attack Elon because he's working for a president that they don't like. And so they don't understand how this works. He's got a team of the best scientists in the world who know what they're doing. The quote failures are not failures in terms of scientific innovation. They are progress. That it's always progress. Again, Elon Musk is the first person to ever catch a rocket out of midair. I believe he's the first person to ever land a rocket on a platform like that. SpaceX is, but the fact that they've caught, now they didn't say anything before because he tried to catch the rocket once and the wind shifted everything off course and he wasn't able to do it. And then they did it twice in a row. And now he's had 2 Starships. Actually, one of the catches, the Starship, actually the last catch, the Starship blew up too. But again, it's all determining new groundbreaking science. And if you are mocking this as quote failure, this is not failure. I don't see this as failure. I know Elon Musk doesn't see this as failure. This is not failure because every single time you learn something new. I always say, people make mistakes. Like I always say this with people that I used to manage. I used to be like, and somebody told me once, like, I don't care if you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's that you learn from your mistakes. So these types of rockets and these rockets exploding are them, like, they're making mistakes, but they're trying to figure out what those mistakes are and they're learning from them. And and then they need somebody like Elon to send these rockets up there to, bring people home from their space station because they get trapped up there. What else did they say about this?
Oh,
yes.
yes. Please
Touche.
put it
How
up
is it
there.
the guy that keeps blowing stuff up literally and figuratively is firing people claiming that they are failures? We know his failures have nothing to do with DEI because he doesn't believe in it, but he'd possibly be succeeding right now if he did. You see, clearly there's a lot of unqualified people running this thing.
Again, they caught 2 rockets. And obviously they have a good team, and you learn from failures. You learn from mistakes. You learn from these types of things. If you don't learn from them, then you're failing. But this is why MSNBC is losing viewership. This is why MSNBC has to fire their hosts. They're firing some of their biggest hosts because they're failing. You want to talk about failure? MSNBC is a failure, and they are drowning right now in their partisanship. It is what it is. All right, moving on to one of the big topics of the day, though. It's if you haven't really paid attention, not a lot of people. This isn't like one of these big news stories that's been on mainstream media much, but I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. We had Syria fell to the rebels, and they were so they fell to the rebels, and when that happened, we were calling they were, it was Al-Qaeda rebels. We had been funding these rebels against Assad in Syria, and for a long time, people have been saying that, like, these types of foreign policy things, when you start to look through history, this is why I became so anti-interventionist, even as somebody who served in the military. When I started realizing that, like, Afghanistan is reminiscent of Syria. So Afghanistan 1980s was very similar to what was happening in Syria. Except for it was the Russians or the Soviet Union that was in there occupying Afghanistan. We also had a consulate. Our consulate in Afghanistan back then was attacked, very similar to Benghazi. And so when you start to see history kind of replaying itself, you start to understand the landscape of things. And Syria is one of those. You had ISIS. So there was 3 different groups of organizations that were fighting in Syria. You had ISIS, which we did not like ISIS, obviously. We had you had the rebels who are now in charge, who won out in the end. And then you had the Assad regime, which the Russians actually backed the Assad regime. Many people, including Donald Trump, Tulsi Gabbard, even just a few weeks ago was calling this, but she's been calling this for the last 10 years, that if we have no love for Assad, but if we take him out, the alternative is much worse, and we're basically backing Al-Qaeda, and that's what's going on in Syria. And she basically called it. So right now, Syrian security forces are executing Alawite, I don't know how to say that, civilians, which those civilians are mostly Christians. I think they're all Christians. And they were known to be to support the Assad regime in that area. And they're basically just rounding up those people and executing them. I can't play the videos because I'm sure YouTube would strike me down for that. But I will just show, so the BBC reported Syrian Observatory for Human Rights recorded at least 162 civilians field executions taking place in Syria as the crackdown from the government has come about. Defense Minister Israeli Cats shared a video on X with men's bodies piled up with some of their pants pulled down in Syria. Others have been posted on the platform, appearing to show civilians being forced to bark like dogs. There are new videos coming out of Syria, entire families being slaughtered in their homes, women and children. The new Islamist president of Syria is silent as his forces go door to door conducting ethnic killings. Like I said, I can't share this video. I do want to show like all the people in this truck are alive, but you can see that they are rounding them up. All these people are alive, but they're rounding people up in trucks, taking them to fields and murdering them. And I can't show you the videos because obviously YouTube would not like those images on here. But look, like I said, Tulsi Gabbard in her confirmation hearing was asked about her relationship with Assad. Now remember, they used to call Tulsi Gabbard's biggest criticism from people on right and left, the neocons on the right and Democrats on the left, is that she was, quote, an Assad apologist, or that she was basically shilling for Assad. When she was basically saying that we were destabilizing the region like we've always done, because I do believe that our involvement in the Middle East has basically destabilized it. And that's what she was calling out. She had met with Assad once, and they thought that's why she, like literally her talking about this issue is why she was placed on that Quiet Skies watch list in the first place. And she had a great answer to Mark Kelly, who I believe is a Republican, on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Gabbard, when Russia was denying us use of chemical weapons, they accused the U.S. of supporting terrorists. This is a line that Putin used frequently during the Syrian civil war as he supported Assad. Syrian officials made similar comments. They did it repeatedly. They did it in public. They did it at the United Nations. In 2016, you gave an interview in which you said, and this is a quote, "The U.S. is providing direct and indirect support to terrorist groups in order to overthrow the Syrian government." And in 2019, on the Democratic presidential debate stage, you said of President Trump, this is a quote, "This current president is continuing to betray us. We were supposed to be going after al-Qaeda, but over years now, not only have we not gone after al-Qaeda, our president is supporting al-Qaeda." So I'm interested to hear, what was your goal in saying these things? And did you consider, before saying them, the motives of Iran and Russia, what their motives might have been before making these claims?
Senator, as someone who enlisted in the military specifically because of al-Qaeda's terrorist attack on 9/11 and committing myself and my life to doing what I could to defeat these terrorists, it was shocking and a betrayal to me and every person who was killed on 9/11, their families and my brothers and sisters in uniform. When, as a member of Congress, I learned about President Obama's dual programs that he had begun really to overthrow the regime of Syria, and being willing to, through the CIA's Timber Sycamore program that has now been made public, of working with and arming and equipping al-Qaeda in an effort to overthrow that regime, starting yet another regime change war in the Middle East. DoD train and equip program, again, begun under President Obama, is widely been known, looked at and studied, that ultimately resulted in over $500 million being used to train who they called moderate rebels, but were actually fighters working with and aligned with al-Qaeda's affiliate on the ground in Syria, all to move forward with their regime change and not acknowledging what was obvious at the time and what has unfortunately borne true, which was that a regime change war in Syria, much like the regime change wars in Iraq, the toppling of Gaddafi and Mubarak, while these are all dictators, would likely result in the rise of Islamist extremists like al-Qaeda taking power. I shed
So-
no tears for the fall of the Assad regime. But today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
And I
not in our
understand, and
interests.
I appreciate your answer, and thank you. My concern has to do with the tendency to repeat Russian and Syrian, and even in some cases, I think we'll get into in the closed session, Iranian information, and to discount what comes from our intelligence community.
Senator, every American deserves to know that people in our own government were providing support to our sworn enemy, Al-Qaeda. That should not be acceptable by anyone.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Gabbard.
so because she was right, it's not that she was right. It becomes that it was that nations like Russia and Iran were right about who would take over. I don't understand. Like she was right in what happened. She has been right in what happened. And this is the history of our involvement in the Middle East and why we have no business in the Middle East in general supporting at all. Like we just have only destabilized the region. And she was right. Islamic extremists have taken over Syria and are now executing people in the streets, in fields. You know, an organization like Al-Qaeda came in. Yeah. So Al-Qaeda-like organization came in and is now ruling the region. And we are seeing just history continue to repeat ourselves over and over and over. And see, Lizzie, you're absolutely right. The definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over and expecting different outcomes. 1000%. That is what's going on here. This is what we've done for generations upon generations upon generations. Our involvement in the Middle East has been nothing but an utter failure. We don't have any reason to be trying to dictate who can lead and what we should do over there. Yes, these people are bad people. Assad was not a good person. Saddam Hussein was not a good person. But at the end of the day, we have only caused chaos and destruction. Like we created ISIS because we went into Iraq. Some of our foreign involvement is what radicalized. What involvement? Oh, our involvement in Saudi Arabia is what radicalized bin Laden. Our involvement in these regions creates these types of terrorist organizations so that way then we can go fight these terrorist organizations with boots on ground. So the military industrial complex continues to make its money and get paid. Like eventually we're going to be in Syria because of something that happens, right? And this is, I mean, all these neocons out there, the reason why they're so upset about like us, they were calling her names and everything like that is because they're making money off of this. They are making money off the military industrial complex. All these neocons and let me see, Rog Nationalist points out, she was called an Assad apologist, a Putin toady, an actual Russian agent by Hillary Clinton. Remember, Hillary Clinton called her a Russian agent for speaking the truth about Syria. And now she is absolutely, unfortunately, correct on all accounts as to what would happen in Syria if we continued to fund an Al-Qaeda affiliate in the region. Can you imagine that? Think about this too. We were fighting Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan at the same time as we were funding Al-Qaeda in Syria. We were funding against our own soldiers. This is a pretty good statement. Let me see. One person who will be feeling grim sense of vindication as she watches these events is Tulsi Gabbard, the newly appointed director of national intelligence. For the better part of a decade, Gabbard warned the consequences of toppling Assad. In 2017, she actually traveled to Syria to meet him, and when she came back to the U.S., she said there's no difference between the mainstream rebels fighting Assad, who received U.S. backing, and the Islamic State. Tulsi Gabbard was right. She told us exactly what would happen because of her foresight, her grasp of real politic, and her refusal to toe the deep state line on regime change in the Middle East. Gabbard has been labeled an Assad apologist, a Putin toady, and worse, all an actual and worst of all, an actual Russian agent. Baby-eating warmonger Hillary Clinton repeated the last charge on more than one occasion in the run-up to the 2020 election. Hillary said Russia was grooming Gabbard as a third-party candidate to split the Democrat vote and hand the election to Donald Trump. Gabbard fired back, calling Clinton the queen of warmongers, embodiment of corruption, and personification of the rot that has sickened the Democrat Party for so long. This is why she became a Republican, and the Democrats love the neocons, warmongers coming into their side. I mean, think about this, that again, the Republicans have now become the party of anti-war, where the Democrats have always feigned anti-war, and but really they believed in, you know, it just as much as the neocons did. She was, I remember we were even talking about that as the lead up to her becoming the director of national, like being the nominee for the director of national intelligence. They were saying she's a traitor, like she's a Putin asset. She works for Putin. I'm like, you realize you're calling, I said it on this show, like you realize you're calling an officer in the United States military a traitor by calling her that. And if she is a traitor, then that is punishable by death, right? So what is the end state of what you're trying to, you know, claim she is? So she called it, but it is interesting because Donald Trump called it 10 years ago as well. Donald Trump was on this side 10 years ago, and this is what he said.
So I've watched Assad, and I've watched a little bit on the other side. The problem is the other side of Assad, we have no idea who they are. They probably are racist. I'm saying, are we better off with Assad? We have no idea who these people are. We give them weapons, we give them ammunition, we give them everything. Aaron, we have no idea who, I mean, maybe it's worse than Assad. So what are we doing? Why are we involved? We have to get rid of ISIS, very importantly. But I look at Assad, and Assad to me looks better than the other side. And, you know, this has happened before. We back a certain side, and that side turns out to be a total catastrophe. Russia likes Assad seemingly a lot. Let them worry about ISIS. Let them fight it out. So I've watched Assad, and I've watched.
Yeah. I mean, he's right. He is right that, you know, the whole idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend is not a good strategy, because typically the enemy of your enemy is also your enemy. When there's no good guys on the like in the street, in the fight, you know, maybe they're both just awful. But, you know, it's the old phrase, I guess, you know, the grass is always greener on the other side. We always end up backing these rebels who end up being terrible people. I mean, think about, like, Tulsi mentioned Gaddafi. when we toppled the Gaddafi regime, so when the rebels toppled the Gaddafi regime, not long after that, we had the attack in the Benghazi attack. Remember? So that's what ends up happening. It's like we're backing these people, we're giving them weapons and resources and all this stuff to fight these proxy wars for us, and then they end up coming back and hitting us in the face. And in some cases, like in Israel, for example, we end up fighting a proxy war between ourselves. Because like in Israel, we pay a lot for the Iron Dome defense system, and then we give, aid and humanitarian assistance to Hamas. And then we gave them COVID aid, which then not long after the Biden administration took office and we got COVID aid, we saw a crap ton of rockets being shot into the Iron Dome defense system that we fund. Like, that to me is fighting a proxy war between ourselves. We're funding both sides. So maybe we should just fund no sides in any country. This is what has made me so much of an isolationist. I've seen, when you start to notice patterns in history, you start to realize how things work. You start to see that we don't have a good track record. We really don't. Not on these things, at least. But hopefully, here's the thing is, now what's going to happen? Are we going to go in there and try to establish a new government? No. Like, they don't want our type of government over there. We found that out in Iraq, right? Afghanistan and Iraq, we were there for so long because, like, you can lead a fish to water, but you can't make them want to fight. You can't give them the passion to fight for their own country and their own freedoms, when in most cases they would seem to rather not have the same freedoms as we do and live their lives however, like, in whatever way that they want, right? So it just seems like we should just not deal with what's going on over there. Let's not fund the forever wars. Let's not allow the military industrial complex to reign supreme. But here's the thing is, like, Representative Massey a little bit ago said, he actually made a good point today when he said that, the military industrial complex is always hungry. So when we shifted $50 billion, when we ended the war in Afghanistan and stopped spending $50 billion in Afghanistan, that money just went to Ukraine. Like, there are so many people in our government and in this country who, if war stops, if the killing stops, they don't make as much money. And that is very sad, because that's blood money. In so many ways, it's blood money. Now, if we were building this stuff and we were training to defend ourselves, then sure. But when it all encompasses that we are fighting proxy wars around the world, and it goes back to what we talked about last week in Ukraine, where we just want peace. But most people don't want peace over there. Why? Because it's making people money. I would rather just try to get Putin to stop, negotiate peace, and then have strength through power, but not sending our troops everywhere in the world. Like, let's go back to pulling everything back and protect our own borders. But speaking of Thomas Massey, we talked about this on the show. We talked a little bit about the budget fights in Congress. And currently we have a spending bill, a continuing resolution. So remember back in September? Last September, I think, they passed a continuing resolution to get past the election, which made sense. So just spend what we're currently spending, just keep moving forward to get us past the election. So that way, when Trump takes office, we can actually, or that way, whenever whoever got elected would have the mandate to do what their constituents want, do what their voters want. And Trump got elected, and we start to expect spending cuts, right? Because that's what he ran on. So December comes around. They ended up, because Trump wasn't actually in office at the time, they put a spending bill out there to get us past the inauguration. So Trump would be in office. So now we're coming up to when that December bill, that was a huge controversy in and of itself, because Thomas Massey voted no on it, which rightfully voted no. And so coming up to now, that resolution is about to run out, and now, if this is, I believe this is the same continuing resolution that they passed last week. If it's a different one, I'm not sure. No, it's a new one this week. So according to Massey, which I trust Massey on these things, if it passes this week, the continuing resolution obligates Trump from now until this September to spend the same amount of money on generally the same things as Biden spent the last 15 months in office. He says we could pass rescissions later to undo some things, but there's no commitment to do so. So there's no commitment to, like, Congress can go in and actually I've never once in my life seen them ever pass rescissions on a bill to pull back from what's already spent. Once it's already voted on, it's spent. Like, basically, this continuing resolution undoes what DOGE has been finding and doing. It would still fund USAID at the same levels. It might not be spending the money on the same stuff, but it's still spending the money on USAID at the same levels, because the way that it works is Congress dictates where money is spent. Congress has the power of the purse. The president has the bully pulpit to make this to force the Congress to spend in a manner that he sees fits, but they ultimately have the power of the purse and dictate where money is allocated to. So this bill basically funds everything that DOGE just started to cut. And unless they are planning to go back and so this is to fund the government, but they would have to go back in to pull back on those funds. They can't. Like, they can't. They can't pull it back, the money, or they could. Like I said, they can, but there's never any will to do so. Like, I've never seen Congress come in and be like, "Hey, we're gonna cut the spending that we just spent. We're gonna take these things, and we're gonna actually pass a bill through Congress to get these things done." No. Usually, these things come with a fight in Congress with a threat to shut down government. There is no threat to shut down government right now if they pass this and then try to pass rescissions later. It's just not going to happen. I just would never trust that the rescissions are going to ever happen. They've never happened that I can remember. Just never going to happen. And so many people just want Massey to go along because it's the Trump administration that's doing it. But, I mean, Donald Trump increased the deficit $8 trillion in his first administration. past performance is the best indicator of future performance. So while I voted for Trump because I thought he had Doge, he had all this unity stuff, and there's other reasons why I would have voted for Trump, I'm not confident that he is not going to go out there and spend a ton of money. People are like, oh, he knows what he's doing, but he didn't cut the budget in his first administration. And he wants to get us to September. Well, once we get into September, then we start getting into primary and general election season. And these people aren't going to want to cut spending during midterm elections. I mean, so the midterm election season, they're not going to want to cut spending and risks, upsetting their voter bloc. No, you have to do it now. We don't have time. History has shown, just by the way that the voting record, like the voting districts that are going to be voting, that history has shown that we will flip at least one chamber of Congress will become Democrat after next election, after the midterms. And it's such tight margins as it is. And then when you lose one chamber, you lose all power. And then it becomes, well, we couldn't get anything passed because we were in gridlock in Congress, which generally gridlock is good, but not when it comes to spending. Because gridlock would be good if on most stuff that Congress could do. I think we're in the best position we're in right now because we're in gridlock because the Senate, the 60 vote in the Senate is not going to let most stuff pass through. But these CRs and everything like that, they are the reconciliation bills. So they can go through with just a 50 point majority to go through the Senate. And so that's what you need. That's the only things that we're going to be able to get through is reconciliation. So if these don't go through, then Rand Paul is on the Senate side is saying the same thing. The two people I probably trust and agree with most in Congress are Thomas Massie and Rand Paul, and both of them are not just no's, but hell no's on this legislation. So Rand Paul says, despite Doge's findings of loony left-wing USAID programs, the Republican spending bill continues to fund the very foreign aid Elon Musk proposes to cut. The bill continues spending at the inflated pandemic levels and will add $2 trillion of debt this year. Count me as hell no. Thank you for these. I mean, Massie and Rand Paul are two of the only people that seem to have a spine in Congress and actually want to fix our budget, not bankrupt our country. Because at some point, our country is going to go bankrupt. Now, the only alternative, I don't know if this was said tongue in cheek, but I did see somebody say it earlier, ask the question, is Donald Trump wanting to get this to September because they need to refinance the debt in September? I don't know. It could be, but I don't care. I want to see changes to the current levels. We don't need another continuing resolution. We need a budget, and we need a budget that has cuts, and cuts that dig deeper into just the baseline. Okay, so if I talked about this before, but if you look at how we run baseline budgeting, whereas every year there's an automatic increase that happens with the budget. So like if we just fund at 20, say we just funded at 2024 levels, sometimes the CBO would consider that a cut, even though you're not actually cutting spending. It's still it's not an actual spending increase, but it's also not a cut it's not a cut. You're just spending at the same level. It would be considered a cut because the baseline shifts every year. And yes, we still use it. So, but we'll see where that goes. I think supposed to be voted on this week, supposed to be on Wednesday. So it's gonna be a fight for the next couple of days. We'll see how that happens. And here we go. So, California Governor Gavin Newsom says he agrees with no men in women's sports, no males in female sports, as we've talked about on the show plenty of times. As you see, I have my XXXY hat in the back. We talk about it all the time. This is what he told Charlie Kirk on, so Gavin Newsom's got a new podcast. This is what he told Charlie Kirk on this issue.
It's like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that. There's also a humility and a grace, that these poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand. How can we address this issue with the kind of decency that I think, is inherent in you, but not always expressed?
It's like you right now should come out and be like,
Okay. A lot of people were saying I agree with him here. I can't believe I'm agreeing with Newsom. I think Newsom's a snake. I think he's slippery. I think he didn't actually say that he would agree with no males in female sports. I agree with him in the part that obviously I agree that everybody should be treated with dignity and respect, trans people included. Obviously, I think that trans people deserve dignity and respect. Now, using the suicide line is manipulative language, buying into the manipulative language. What I'll say, he didn't actually say that though. He said, yes, it's an issue of fairness. I'll agree with you there. But are you saying that but what's the issue of fairness? Are you saying that it's unfair for males to compete in female sports? Because yes, I would agree with that. But I think he's setting it up to say that, well, I think he would actually at some point say that he thinks, well, if a male has not gone through male puberty, then they should be allowed to compete in female sports. I think that's what he would be setting up to say, which I would disagree with, because then it's not an issue of fairness, right? Because then it would be more fair, according to many leftists. Also, his state has some of the worst laws in the country. They are a sanctuary state for trans minors. Minors can go there, become wards of the state, and get and get prescribed and I guess taking trans hormone treatments, taking hormones and having surgeries in the state as a sanctuary state, even without parental permission. He's also signed the law that says that a male sex offender who is 24 or under can basically sleep with a 14-year-old and not have to register with the sex offenders list. Like, that's the law in California, that you're not considered a sex offender if you are sleeping with a 14-year-old and you're within a 10-year age gap of said minor. That is insane to me. Insane. But that's California, and Gavin Newsom signed that law. So I think he is so slippery that that's not what he actually meant. I don't think that he agreed in this moment that males should not males should never be competing in female sports. I don't think he said it. I think he's being slick. He can explain this away to his base. And I do believe everybody when they're saying he's running for president. I do believe that, and I actually believe that he will be the nominee for president because he's willing to go out there and have conversations with people like Charlie Kirk. And this is what's interesting is people are asking the question, why would Charlie Kirk have this conversation? And I think it's because Republicans and conservatives in general can back up their ideas and they're willing to have the tough conversations with anybody. It's usually the left who does not want to come onto conservative platforms to talk about their issues because their issues are indefensible. So I really think that that's what it is. So I just don't believe what he says here. Now there is, but even still, his base is starting to flip on him. So Jojo from Jers says, and Ron, just super leftists are all like, I will be voting for a candidate in the Democrat primary who doesn't promote Charlie Kirk. Basically saying, I will only vote for somebody who lives in an echo chamber and doesn't care what anybody else but we say, which is literally exactly what lost Kamala Harris the election, right? Because somebody like him going on with Charlie Kirk is what will bring more moderates to his side, will actually humanize him to moderates to be like, you know what? I agree with that. Okay, he doesn't agree with the males and female sports. I mean, that's, again, remember, 80% of people in the country don't agree that males should be competing in female sports. So that's not a tough position for Newsom to take. And like I said, I think he's slimy enough to not take it. And talking to Charlie Kirk helps him with moderates. These people don't care. They don't understand why so many, centrists voted for Donald Trump over Kamala Harris. And it's because the left has built themselves such an echo chamber, and they're not even letting anybody in. You have to pass the full-blown purity test to get into leftist spaces. So nobody wants to have purity tests and cancel culture. They just want to live their lives. And you know what? And when people on the right start saying things they agree with, they move over, and then the left goes, "What happened? Why'd you leave?" And then they tell you, and then they say, "Well, you guys, people, you became too hard to be around." I mean, they kept saying, "Oh, now that is the whole thing. The left needs its own Joe Rogan." Well, the left used to have Joe Rogan, but they pushed him out. It's this whole idea, like, so many people I know, so many friends are like, I didn't leave the left left me. And that's what happens. The left keeps getting further and further extreme, and people are leaving. Here's another one. This is an interesting clip too, talking about the porn in schools. Oh, 1 second. I lost volume.
4,240 books or titles, libraries and schools are banned in 2023. Is that not as a conservative?
Well, it depends. I mean, like, I think we can both agree pornography should not be taught to 9-year-olds.
Fair point.
Okay,
Fair.
So that's a book ban.
All right. Well, there were some other books.
Oh, no.
Bill O'Reilly's
that
book
was the
banned.
Moms for Liberty contention. Time out.
Yeah.
Like, I agree on Bill O'Reilly. The Moms for Liberty movement that you made a big thing of was just no porn to 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
We agree. So those books should be banned.
Well, okay.
So what we should do right now is every California school that has porn in their library should be kicked out.
Does that
is
include
a
the
book ban.
Bible?
Well, I wouldn't say the Song of Solomon is porn.
No, but I mean, some have made that point. Is that a fair point? Or
I don't think that's fair.
And as a man
all.
of faith, and I deeply admire that about you.
Thank you.
Sincerely.
Yes, but no, I mean, again, the Song of Solomon is rather risque.
No, it's
but what we're
very
talking about in these books is not just the words; it's also the images. And again, your audience can look at the images themselves.
Okay.
It's highly graphic. But again,
it seems a banning binge. I mean, at next level, sort of cancel culture.
But why do you think moms are doing that? Do you think it's because they want to have mind control, or do you think that they have come across incident of highly provocative material?
I love moms, but this moms, I mean, we don't have to get into Moms for Liberty. It
you
seems
brought up the book bans,
deeply organized for a larger agenda, but that's my humble opinion.
No, but let me just, kind of complete the point, is that it's easy to just call it kind of a book ban, but when you actually have to read some of these books, it will take your breath away of some of this stuff, right? You're like, okay, we're teaching a 10-year-old how to put a condom on.
I know. I just have a problem with, who the hell is going to decide that? Government? I mean, Ron DeSantis is going to decide what I can read or say in the boardroom, in the classroom.
This is the exercise of politics, though. Yeah. The exercise of politics is the highest form of community because it blends morality and sociability. So what we do is we have discussion and elections, and we have boards and commissions, right? And we as a people say, okay, no porn for 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
And that's politics, right?
So, yeah, obviously Newsom again there is conflating. He's conflating some books, like a book ban, with the porn that we've discussed at length on this show, right? So, like, when the problem is he's obfuscating a little bit. He mentions Bill Riley's book. Now, I don't know what state or whatever that was that in Bill Riley's book, but here's the thing is, like, I believe there were books, was it Of Mice and Men? There were multiple books that had been taught in classrooms for generations. And many of these books were actually banned by Democrat politicians, not conservatives. It was like the Democrats were banning books based on, like, quote, racism and racial tensions. I believe 1984 was banned in some spots. I'm like, 1984 is a book that everybody should read, because it points out just what happens when government gets too much power, when Big Brother's out there looking, I believe that it was removed from some school districts, Democrat-led school districts. And it was like all the books that I've seen and worked on, I can't even show pictures on here without getting banned off of this site. Yet we're supposed to think that those are okay for teens. Like, this book is gay. Was it the queer? I haven't been involved with the book stuff in a while. There's a bunch of books out there. I had like 4 of them that I had pictures of at one point that was like, these are all the these are all the different, and it was imagery. Like, I would show the imagery and you would get banned. But it goes down to who's going to decide it. It goes down to your local school boards. Like, if there's a commission that says, hey, this book shouldn't be in here, it should be at the state and school board level, that we say, hey, these books don't belong in your schools because they have graphic images. But but that's the thing is, again, it's not book bans. Nobody's banning books. Like, if a parent wants their child to read some of these books, they can take them out at the local library, but they should be in the adult section at the local library, or they can purchase them for them on Amazon for like $5. If you want your kids to learn this stuff, okay, I guess, but they shouldn't be readily available in kids' schools. I don't know. All right, y'all. That is all I have for this evening. Thanks for joining. Like I said, keep an eye on the page here in the next couple of days. Hopefully I can have some information to share with y'all. Hoping to. But lots of good things coming up. I'm excited. get excited. We are moving forward. So again, if you've made it this far in the show, make sure to click that like and subscribe button. Follow me across all social media platforms, and I will see you next time.